morning, everybody. Welcome into another edition of the Sack City Podcast. I am your host, the one and only Vinny Milani, alongside my cats who are here in this new office of mine that I'm just trying to get together. But I'm joined, of course, as always, by your boy, AJ Johnson. Below us, we have my best friend in the whole entire world. He is Aaron, the Mukesiah Mukes. It is a beautiful July 6th. Whoa. There it is.
We both saw it coming.
I knew it was going to happen. I wasn't going to say anything. I knew it was going to happen.
I saw
all black people look alike. We know.
Pulling the curtain back, someone, I don't know which one of you it was, moved me into the right spot. And I saw that, and I was like, okay, everyone's in the right spot. I don't need to do anything. Like, this is good to go. And then now it's me looking like the plantation asshole that I am. I digress. If you're not watching us on YouTube, you probably should. It is a beautiful July 6th morning here in the city. Episode 50 is about to kick off. I feel like that's a baby milestone for us here. Yeah. 50 shows is a special time here for us in Sac City. We've been rolling. We're talking AFC South today. Jaguars, Titans, Texans, Colts. That's the other team, Dylan's Colts. Talking their fantasy outlook for 2022. Aaron, how goes it on this beautiful Wednesday morning?
It's good, man. I'm here. Hopefully my internet stays alive today. I'm getting internet into my new apartment on Thursday, so that'll be nice. But yeah, I'm good, man. I'm excited to talk, Jaguars, I guess. No, I got a lot to say. I have a lot to say about the AFC South. I got some hot takes, especially when we kick it off right off the top. So yeah, I'm ready. Oh yeah. This is going to be a set like you would think. There's some of these teams in this division don't have a whole lot of juice when it comes to fantasy. You look at a big drop off when it comes to certain players, and between for example, like Brandin Cooks. When we get to the Texans, it's like there's Brandin Cooks as a fantasy option, and then there's everyone else. It's super far until you get to the next good value for a Houston Texans player. But we're going to talk about that and so much more in just a few moments. Let's get into our morning headlines here. Aaron, your boy Deontay Johnson has made headlines. Well, I should say people reporting with the Steelers have made headlines talking about your boy Deontay Johnson. The Athletic reports that the Steelers won't offer Deontay Johnson, quote, anything near McLaurin or anybody else that got more than $20 million this year or per year. Do you think Deontay Johnson should be getting that $20 million price tag that just like everyone else that has gotten this offseason? Yeah, I do. You guys know how I feel about Deontay Johnson. I've been pretty high on him. I mean, as far as I can remember, this is the guy that is super athletic. When he first came into
So we're just gonna let it happen. Should I jump in?
I didn't know. I didn't know if it was me or him. I didn't know if it was me or him. To be honest,
that's fair. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Damn, he was right. We did waste his good internet.
I don't think it's wasting his. I think we have to nix that whatever it is at this point. Like the facade that we have to start the show as soon as Aaron enters the studio, because I think the platform that we are on, shout out StreamYard, I think once we go on that, it sucks a lot of internet connection. It changes the game. It changes the game when it comes to internet.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Deontay Johnson? The reports about the Steelers might not be looking to pay Deontay Johnson that $20 million price tag that we've seen other receivers get.
When it comes to this thought process, I do believe Deontay Johnson is talented enough to deserve that type of money, especially the way the NFL is headed, the way the market demands. And that's what we talk about in the NFL every single year. It's the next player up. There's a lot of players that don't deserve the type of money they're going to get, and sometimes they don't. But most likely than not, they get paid more than they would because that's what the market demands. With that being said, this is nothing new for the Pittsburgh Steelers, in my opinion. Every single year, there's somebody who wants to get paid early. They say we're not doing that. There's somebody who wants to get paid more. They say we're not doing that. I think back to, I remember Martavis Bryant wanted to get paid when he had himself a good season. They held off on that. Antonio Brown wanted to get paid early. They held off on that. Now they finally did make him the highest paid wide receiver. And how did he thank them? We all know how that story went. And even when they did that, it was after he had 6 seasons of over 100 receptions each year and over 1,000 yards each year. So he literally had to be one of the best wide receivers the NFL had ever seen for them to justify paying him that money. And then he ruined it for everyone after them. So it's one of those things where it's the last old school mentality, I feel like, that the Pittsburgh Steelers hold on to. It's the way they've done things. It's the way it works for them. And I think they're just staying true to who they are. Now, with that being said, I think they'll pay him. I don't know if it'll be that much, but maybe they'll get him a friendly deal, and then he'll show that he deserves more. And then once he does, they'll pay him better. But this is who the Pittsburgh Steelers are and who they have been.
Yeah, that's what I feel like. It's more on the fact that the Steelers are not known for breaking the bank for a wide receiver. I mean, we've seen it happen, breaking the bank for any position, I should say, at least on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, we saw all the headaches with Le'Veon Bell, then, I mean, Antonio Brown, and, I mean, they didn't go out and re-sign Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, the Steelers are known to be an organization, I feel like, that will not break the bank if they don't have to. Aaron, do you want to pick back up where you left off with your Deontay Johnson talk?
He does not.
He does not. Oh man, this might be the show. This might be the show. Yep. Yep. We might see what ends up happening while he's in the green room. But okay, so now that we've talked about Deontay Johnson, we'll possibly get Aaron back in here in just a few moments. Man, it's so funny watching him in the green room. He just goes away. He goes with the blank screen. It's creepy at some point.
It's tough.
Yeah, it is. It is. But so that's our morning headlines. Deontay Johnson was it. He was the big time headline. Oh, Aaron might be back. He might be back. Let's bring him in. Let's bring him out. AJ, do us a favor while we go through all of this and try and get everything working here. Tell the beautiful people at home where they can follow us at.
Well, I mean, I know that it is Wednesday, but don't it feel like a case of the Mondays? Check it out, Sac City Pod, ladies and gentlemen. Hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. We need you guys to hit the love, hit the likes, hit the shares, and tell everybody about Sac City Pod. 9 times out of 10, the internet is way better. So always check in with your boys at Sac City Pod. Once again, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Your boys are still here in town. Come join the city, Sac City, that is. Hashtag GMSC. Wednesday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern.
Dude, this is completely off topic. No one's going to give a shit about this that's watching us right now. But StreamYard has added the ability to add our own music and our tracks. So a soundboard is coming. Music is coming. Bruh. It's going to be great. Shout out StreamYard for being the best streaming platform out there. Whoa. What's happening? Who did that?
I just entered myself back in, but I'm not AJ Johnson.
So Aaron, now that you're we can hear you perfectly. Tell us about your Deontay Johnson take before we move on.
I don't want to talk about Deontay Johnson. Pay the man.
Got it. Pay the man. Got it. Let's get into our fantasy football talk. Covering the AFC South, we're going to get positional real quick and dive into one of the bigger positional topics within the AFC South. Lots of potentially good wide receivers within the AFC South. There's Robert Woods, Brandin Cooks, Alec Pierce, guys like that. AJ, how would you rank the fantasy wide receivers in the AFC South?
You know, I won't say struggled with this, but I definitely had many different thoughts here, and mostly because this division is just devoid of a lot of great talent, but there are some good guys. So at the top, I do think he's shown his consistency enough. Brandin Cooks at number 1 for me, only 2 seasons where it wasn't 1,000 yards, still only 29, and I know that's a little bit older, but he's not over the hump of 30 yet. Then I got Robert Woods second, and I argued a little bit myself with him there and Michael Pittman, but I decided to go Robert Woods. His last 2 full seasons were great in LA before the injury. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Michael Pittman, I like the rise that he's coming up with. Christian Kirk, I think he's going to have a good time down there in Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence and whatnot. Then on the second half, I went Treylon Burks. I like the upside. If he can stay on the field. I know there's some issues right now, but we don't know until the season actually starts. Marvin Jones has shown a little bit of consistency and can be trusted. And then I went with Alec Pierce over John Mechie with the thought process that Alec Pierce will kind of fit into his scheme a little bit more, and I think will kind of help out Matt Ryan a little better. And then I put John Mechie just as he comes into the season later on. I think he's their new version of Will Fuller, hopefully without the injuries going forward, but not to say much because he has one now. But, that's the 8 I went with for now. We'll see how it pans out.
Aaron?
I find that very interesting that number 1, you have Robert Woods, number 2. Number 1, you have Robert Woods, number 2. I feel like that's way too high for a guy in a new offense and a low-volume passing offense who's probably going to be the number 2 there behind Treylon Burks coming off an ACL injury. And I wholeheartedly disagree with having Michael Pittman below Brandin Cooks. Brandin Cooks is far more consistent, as over the years we've seen him be a more consistent wide receiver. But I think we saw what Michael Pittman was capable of last year. Finished the season as, I believe, RB16 or RB17. Had a phenomenal year. A guy that's a touchdown threat, a huge touchdown threat in the red zone. Now you add in Matt Ryan. Had 1,000 yards last year, almost 90 catches. I think he's a little bit better situated than Brandin Cooks. Brandin Cooks had a good year last year, like he does every year, and he was wide receiver 20. And I think that's kind of where he fits in, is that middle of the wide receiver 2 category. But I think his upside is capped. I don't think his upside will have him touching or have a chance to really touch the top 12 wide receivers. I think Michael Pittman can get into the top 12 wide receivers. I would have it Pittman. It's more, throw a dart.
I'll say this real quick. I do think part of me, and a big part of me, kind of went NFL ranking over fantasy while I was looking at this.
That's fair.
But with that being said, too, because I started with Michael Pittman at my number 1. And as I kept going and moving things around, the consistency of Brandin Cooks didn't only come with that. It also came with the thought process of the fact that he's just done it with whatever quarterback he's ever been with. The only seasons his first season in rookie yard, 500 yards. Then 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. Then the year when Robert Woods went off, I think it was 2017 or 2019 in LA. When Robert Woods went off, Brandin Cooks wasn't able to get it there, and he ended up in the 5,000 again. Goes to Houston, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. So you're right about the consistency. Thinking about the fantasy and the upside, I do like the Michael Pittman being in that top 3. And I was talking with Vinny off camera. I probably would have had him number 2, but we're going to get into it later, but I definitely disagree with the Treylon Burks being the number 1 over Robert Woods. We can get into that a little bit later.
I think something that interests me in this conversation especially about Brandin Cooks and the Texans, and I don't want to talk about this when we get to I guess I could save this for a Texan. I want to know about Brandin Cooks a little bit more, not necessarily about his fantasy outlook, but talking about the player that is Brandin Cooks when we get to the Texans, because really there's not a whole lot of meat when it comes to the Texans. So I'll save that there. But I personally would have Michael Pittman at 2 and Brandin Cooks at 1, just for now, because the safety that we know that Brandin Cooks is the guy who has done it before. And obviously, Aaron, you did present the stats of his ceiling has never been that wide receiver 1. He's always been that middle of the pack wide receiver 2. And Michael Pittman Jr. has the potential. With that being said, and with Brandin Cooks being the tease for talking about the Texans, I'm also very interested to see what you guys' thoughts are on Matt Ryan and how he brings in a change to this Indianapolis Colts offense and what that does for Michael Pittman Jr. We'll get into that when we talk about the Colts. We're going to start, though, our fantasy outlook for the AFC South with the Tennessee Titans, and there really is nowhere else to begin than with Derrick Henry, because on our previous shows, Aaron, you have been on, and I think we all kind of almost come to a consensus on how we feel about one Derrick Henry entering the season. Although on Friday's show, if you missed it, I was starting to lean towards hyping up Derrick Henry because of his Instagram workout videos, which is absolutely absurd to hype up anyone about or because of. Aaron, you think that Derrick Henry might take a step back this season. So where does he finish, and where should Derrick Henry be drafted?
Well, let me make things very, very clear before I get to the negative side of Derrick Henry. He's a first-round pick. I mean, middle of the first round is kind of where I'm looking at him. And I think my internet's going to go out again. However, this is a guy that's only finished in the top 5 running backs twice. So when we're picking him, we're talking about a guy who many think could be the number 1 overall running back, number 1 overall player. I just don't think in a PPR format we can trust him to do that. I think we have to look at the offense he plays in, his skill set in the passing game, which is very limited, and just, again, his age and coming off an injury. With a lot of carries under his belt, Derrick Henry is going to be good. But I think there's other backs that you're looking at taking over him when you're talking about top 5 players overall. And I think that's guys like Jonathan Taylor, Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey, perhaps a Cooper Kupp, and so on. So Derrick Henry, middle of the first round, picks 5 through 8, 6 through 9. If you're taking him there, if he drops there and you get him, you're probably happy. I always say I will never probably have Derrick Henry on my team because I'm never going to take him where he goes.
Do you think he finishes as an RB1 this season?
Barring injury? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But again, we look at those RB1s we talk about. Like, I have Josh Jacobs finishing as an RB1. I mean, to finish as an RB1 to top 12 is not that hard to do when you're a guy that gets the ball as much as Derrick Henry gets the ball, because the volume alone will give you the numbers. So when we're talking, I mentioned it before, 3 guys, 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns? 3 guys in the entire NFL. Can Derrick Henry go 1,010 touchdowns? Absolutely. But does that mean he's going to be a top 5 back? Maybe not. So when you account for the passing down work that some of these guys are going to get. So yes, he'll be a top 12 running back, probably more in the middle than the back end. But if anybody's going to drop out, he could be one of them. Like, there is a significant chance that offense takes a step back and they don't score as many touchdowns.
AJ?
I'm okay with him going where he is, 4th, 5th, 6th, that type of thing. I absolutely think he can finish in the top 5. I believe Derrick Henry has one more year of his dominance. I don't know if it's running back 1. If Christian McCaffrey stays healthy, we know he's going to be in the argument for that. I think Jonathan Taylor is in for a close to repeat season, not when, we'll talk about that, of course, but not exactly where it was, but enough to be in the top 3, top 4. So I think Derrick Henry can finish inside the top 5. So if you're drafting him 4 to 8, yeah, I agree. You're going to be happy.
I did want to point out one thing, and I think this is important, especially for people who think about taking Derrick Henry with the number 1 overall as the number 1 overall running back. Derrick Henry ran for 2,000 yards and 17 touchdowns 2 years ago. And he still wasn't the RB1. Like, he was RB3. So 2,000 yards, which is rarely done in the NFL, almost 20 touchdowns, and he still wasn't the RB1. That, to me, it's not, I don't want to say it's a problem. It's just like that upside is always limited by his limited usage in the passing game. And yes, we're talking 3 to number 1. It's not a huge deal. But when I go to take that number 1 draft pick, I want the Christian McCaffrey years when he's running for 1,600, catching 900, and scoring 20 touchdowns. Like, that's what I'm looking for. Jonathan Taylor last year, I'm looking for numbers like that. And with Derrick Henry, I just don't think you can get him because the man's never had 20 catches in the season, never had more than 206 receiving yards. Like, he doesn't catch the ball enough.
He's got a cap. He's got a cap, and that's the thing. You have to be concerned with the injuries too. With a guy like Derrick Henry, bigger back, obviously with a ton of work that he gets. Who knows if he's going to be able to get withstand the amount of carries that he's been getting. I have a feeling if he ends up getting the amount of work that he has had in the past, he won't survive a full 17 games this season. or they're going to have to use Hassan Haskins a little bit more, or whatever running back they have in Tennessee that's going to come in. AJ, outside of Derrick Henry, we talk about Treylon Burks and Robert Woods. Let's get into it here. You had Robert Woods over Treylon Burks. What makes you think he is the number one weapon here in Tennessee? And is he the best fantasy option outside of Derrick Henry?
I think he's going to be. I think he's going to be in that offense. With Robert Woods, firstly, I mean, he's been back since early May at this point. He was in OTAs. I was watching a couple workouts with him, and he's doing cutting drills and looking good. And they're talking about how he's looked since he's come back. And, I mean, they're not just saying, oh, he's going to be okay. They're using words like he's already explosive. He's running phenomenal. They expect him to be 100% by week 1. And if that's the case, I think Ryan Tannehill is likely to trust the veteran a little more than he trusts the rookie at this point in time, as well as the fact that he hasn't been able to build enough chemistry with Treylon Burks at this point because he hasn't been able to be there in OTAs and in minicamps. Now, again, that might change. We all know last year we talked about Jamar Chase dropping the ball, and he came out and had one of the best rookie seasons that we've ever seen. So I'm not saying fade Treylon Burks by any means, but I do believe what Robert Woods will be able to bring to a game like for Ryan Tannehill will be something he looks for. You talk about his usage in the screen game. You talk about his usage in the short game, the versatility and being able to run the ball. There's just so many different ways they're going to be able to get him the ball. Now, the other thing I want to bring up with Robert Woods is his last 2 full seasons in LA were pretty damn good. We're not talking about his injury last year. He 90 catches each of those 2 years, averaged 1,000 yards, and was on about average of 134 targets. You think about A.J. Brown leaving. You think about Julio Jones leaving. That's about 150 targets that have opened up. Then if you want to go a step further, they lost 14 players that had at least 2 targets for Ryan Tannehill. There's a total, and I looked this up, quote Yahoo Sports, so if I'm wrong, go yell at Yahoo. There's a total of 351 targets that have opened up for this passing game. Now, I just told you Robert Woods had 134 in L.A. We bring up the fact that they don't pass as much. Let's say 105, 110 targets for Robert Woods, which is about accurate. A.J. Brown was averaging about 106. Robert Woods carries a 67% catch rating. We're talking about 74 receptions. That could easily turn into another 1,000-yard receiving for a 1,000-yard receiving year for Robert Woods, and that's not even counting whatever he may bring to the rushing game. So I think that he's going to be the trust factor, and then Treylon Burks is going to be able to open the field and make the big plays and gain trust as the season goes on. And that's kind of how I see it breaking down in this first season for the Tennessee Titans, Robert Woods, Treylon Burks, so on and so forth.
If you're not, what you said about like Robert Woods is not wrong at all. Everything you talk about his skill set, he brings all of that to the table. It's just on the wrong team. It's in the wrong offense. Robert Woods was successful with the Rams because of the offense that Sean McVay put forth in there. If you look at his most successful seasons with the Rams, it was because of the type of offense that they ran. 2018, 2019, when he had his 1,000-yard seasons, and then 2020 when he almost got to 1,000. That was a spread it out, Sean McVay, mastermind type offense. This is not that. This is a pound it, play action, deep shot offense, which doesn't fit Robert Woods' game. It fits Treylon Burks, which is why it fit A.J. Brown. And this might sound silly, but this is Robert Woods is more like Julio Jones in the Tennessee Titan offense than he is A.J. Brown in the Tennessee Titans offense. Tennessee Titans don't throw bubble screens. Tennessee Titans, they run play action, 15-yard digs, post routes, deep goes. Those aren't Robert Woods. And so unless that offense changes or they change how they incorporate Robert Woods, I don't know how that fits. I do think there are a number of targets that are going to be available in that offense. I think a number of those targets will go to Burks. I think a number of them will go to Robert Woods, but I think they won't be he won't have as many yards after the catch with the style of offense they play. And then Austin Hooper's also in that offense now, who I think is going to play a big part in the over-the-middle type stuff. So I do think Robert Woods can be ineffective. And I told you guys this before in the offseason. I think he's a much better fit in Tennessee as a football player than as a fantasy asset. I don't think his fantasy numbers are going to be able to live up to what we would need. If he gets 110 targets and 70 catches, he's probably going to have about 650 yards. That's what I think.
I don't. This might be a little drastic here, but I don't think I want either of them. Like, it's not like I'm like saying like I want to avoid, like if I get a good value for them, I'm not going to take them. But like at their ADP, and it's not like it's a bad ADP, but I don't think I want either one of those guys unless they're an absolute steal. In my opinion, I don't like that Tennessee Titans offense as much. Like you said, Aaron, this is a run first team. It's Derrick Henry, and then it's everyone else. And taking the shot on Treylon Burks, taking the shot on Robert Woods, I'm not really sure I want to make that gamble unless it's going to be something drastic. Right now, Robert Woods is being drafted as the wide receiver 39, and Treylon Burks is being drafted as the wide receiver 42. I don't know if I'd want them. There's other guys going around there that I would rather have. Drake London's going ahead of, Drake London's going around there. Brandon Ayuk's going around there. Christian Kirk, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, is going around there. Russell, I think I'd rather. Would you rather Russell? Would you rather Russell Gage or one of those guys? Russell Gage or Robert Woods / Treylon Burks?
If you were asking me in a year where Chris Godwin and Mike Evans were there the whole season, and I know Antonio Brown was fine as the third piece in that offense, but even with all this going on, Antonio Brown talent-wise is an uptick to Russell Gage. But I think because he's still the third option, like I would probably end up taking one of those guys around there, knowing that they are going to be the focal point after a Derrick Henry. But I'd be very happy to get Russell Gage because I think that rapport is going to be really nice with Tom Brady. And it's Tom freaking Brady.
I'd probably take Russell Gage. I'd probably take Treylon Burks over Russell Gage.
Just because he's the number one. That's like I feel like that's what separates them.
It's not because it's not really defined that he's the number one. We assume he's the number one because he's the first round pick. It's really that style of offense. If you look at the way they ran that offense with A.J. Brown, they did draft Treylon Burks to be A.J. Brown. I mean, we joked about him being 2.0 because he's not A.J. Brown per se, but they drafted him to do those things, to go deep and stretch the field. So there's a situation where maybe Treylon Burks only has like 50 catches, 56 catches, but he might have 50 catches and almost 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. And that is going to be a useful fantasy number. And he's going to be on the field. I know that for sure, as long as he's healthy. Yeah. So I think I would probably go there because I think the upside is tremendous if he does have one of those crazy years where Russell Gage is going to be capped because of that offense and how many guys they get involved. And there's going to be games where he has 2 catches for 26 yards, and there's games going to have 9 catches, 90 yards, and a touchdown. So I do like Treylon Burks to be the guy in Tennessee that if you're going to take a Tennessee wide receiver, and I'm with you, Vinny, I'm staying away in most cases. Yeah. But if you're going to take a guy, I probably would lean towards Burks just because of the upside.
I think his first year is between Corey Davis and A.J. Brown. Like in Tennessee. Like,
fair.
That's just kind of what I see. And I know that can be pretty drastic if you remember Corey Davis's rookie year with Marcus Mariota, but still, I mean, that's what we're looking at. We're thinking about these rookies coming in that first year in that offense. So
yeah, there's a few wide receivers going around there that Drake London, Russell Gage, I'd consider, Michael Gallup, I'd consider, and Alan Lazard. I'd consider all those guys over Treylon Burks and Robert Woods, to be completely honest.
I mean, to be fair, AJ Brown's rookie year was 50 catches, 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns.
And 80, yeah. Wasn't a bad by any means. I think the number I hearkened on was his 84 targets, and I feel like it's going to be somewhere around there. I don't expect Treylon Burks to be in the triple-digit targets his first
Correct.
year.
I agree.
And I think he might need that to have the type of AJ Brown year that he had.
Agreed.
That's fair.
Agreed. Let's move on to the Indianapolis Colts here. And obviously the biggest piece on this offense that they brought in was Matt Ryan. It's going to be quite possibly completely change what we have seen before from the Colts. But the focal point of that offense Matt Ryan brought in whoever you bring in. That focal point of that offense is Jonathan Taylor. AJ, what will his workload look like, though, with Matt Ryan being there? Because obviously still most likely going to be the focal point, but what does Matt Ryan do to Jonathan Taylor's workload?
I think it kind of helps preserve him, actually. Not saying that they're going to just stop using him or anything, but if you recall last season, as Carson Wentz kind of went downhill, they started to rush the ball a lot more until the game that it mattered, and they tried to let him prove it all. But so I think you're going to see him carry the ball a little less. I mean, last season he had 332 touches. I think you may see something this year like 315, 320. But the other thing is, I think he gets involved a little more in the passing game, and I think that's something Frank Reich talked about wanting to see, because he proved he can do it. Last season he had, I think it was 40 receptions on 51 targets. This is a guy who can catch the ball. And the thing that Matt Ryan does better than Carson Wentz is he'll get to his check down a lot quicker. He might notice his check down before the snap. And Carson Wentz will take the deep bomb and hope his receiver gets it rather than check it down. Whereas Matt Ryan will go through those progressions and more than likely make the right play. And granted, this year he'll have the time to do that. And even though it's not the last year's offensive line, it's still 20 times better than what Atlanta's offensive line was last season. So I think you see him. I expect Jonathan Taylor to have something like 8 or 9 more catches than he did last season, and probably like 15 to 20 less catches. And as Aaron says, I do believe Nyheim Hines will be back in this offense, kind of like he was when Phillip Rivers was there, another quarterback who would find his checkdowns as running backs. And they do this so that way next season you're not just using up Jonathan Taylor. He can come back if all was healthy and do the same thing again.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the route that you took on that, because even though Matt Ryan may bring more pass attempts to this offense, most likely will, Jonathan Taylor is still that dude, and it's going to preserve him to where it could be to the point where he ends up doing even more work and giving you more fantasy production than what he did last year. Obviously, it's tough to be able to duplicate what he did last year, and you might see that regression, but it's not going to be that drastic. Jonathan Taylor is still going to be that dude. And obviously, you talk about Jonathan Taylor, it's like, why are you talking about him? He's going to be one of the top, probably a top 5 running back. It's just what Matt Ryan does to his workload is the biggest point here. Aaron, are you on you're okay with everything that we just said with that? Or are you thinking over there?
For the most part, listen, there's one thing that just scares me. It's the amount of touches in the NFL that don't carry over from year to year. And it's not that Jonathan Taylor can't handle a workload, but you're talking about a guy who got 360 touches, something like that, 370 touches last year. That amount of touches by a running back it just can't sustain. I believe there's only usually 3 or 4 guys every year that go over 300 touches. Most of these guys are 220, 230 carries, 50 catches, around 280, get upwards of almost 300. Jonathan Taylor was almost at 400. I don't see a year where they do that to him again. This is not a team. They weren't successful. Let's be honest. They weren't successful actually doing it. They didn't even make the playoffs. He was successful, but as a team, they weren't successful. They were trying to protect Carson Wentz. And in doing so, they put a lot on Jonathan Taylor, and he had a hell of a season. But this year, I don't think they feel the need to protect Matt Ryan in that way. I think they look at Matt Ryan as a guy, this guy's won an MVP. He's been to a Super Bowl. I think they feel comfortable saying, you know what, Matt Ryan can go and win us the game, and we don't have to worry about not letting him throw the ball 30 to 35 times if we can keep him upright. So I think that Jonathan Taylor's touches do come down this year. Does it mean his production comes down? No. But I do think that when we look at fantasy, we have to be careful when looking at a guy that just went for 1,800 yards, almost 20 touchdowns, or total of 20 touchdowns, and say it's going to happen again. Because if he loses, say he loses 20 carries, and he catches an extra 10 balls like AJ said, there could be and maybe he doesn't score 20 touchdowns again this year. Maybe Matt Ryan actually throws for more touchdowns this year. That's going to bring those numbers down. So I just worry about having those same expectations from what the number one overall player did year after year when you're bringing in a new quarterback like Matt Ryan.
Yeah. I think you see him come to about 1450 in yards and maybe around 14, 15 touchdowns, maybe falls in. I don't see 18 and 18 or 18 and 20 again. I agree. It's hard to sustain. That's a crazy number. I mean, Derrick Henry literally had to run over the NFL to do it twice. So, and we know Jonathan Taylor, he's more shifty. He can show the power, but I agree. I definitely think it's going to come down. You should expect that. The other crazy thing too is even as a number one fantasy option last year at running back, he only averaged 22 points a game. That's like the lowest number one overall stat since like 2016, I think, maybe 17. So
it's because the running back position is so down and they're always beat up.
Yeah.
There is no more like we have 7 bell cows and you know what I mean? They're all going to play 15, 16 games. Like these guys don't play that, a full season and it's too hard. So when you get a guy that does play a full season, I mean, you're fortunate. A full season could be like 15, 16 games because most don't play all 17.
Right.
Yeah. So we talk about the usage of Jonathan Taylor and now Michael Pittman, on the other hand, as a wide receiver. AJ, you had him third on your list, arguably at 2. Aaron, you would have possibly had him as the number 1 wide receiver in this AFC South. Last season, when you look at when the Colts started to really ramp up on the production and the usage of Jonathan Taylor, we saw Michael Pittman's stats start to drop. His first 10 games, 729 yards, 5 touchdowns, 33 receptions on 53 targets. Very good first 10 games. But when the Colts started using Jonathan Taylor and started really relying on him, we saw Michael Pittman's stats drop. And that's maybe an obvious thing to say. But now they bring in Matt Ryan, and that might be a big-time difference maker for Michael Pittman Jr. Aaron, what is the ceiling and what is the floor for Michael Pittman?
The ceiling is a wide receiver 1. The floor is a wide receiver 2.
That's a good floor.
Oh, he is a great floor. This is a guy that is going to be a fantasy asset. He's going to be productive. He's a huge big body threat. The problem at the end of the season last year wasn't really his usage. He didn't score any touchdowns. I believe from week 10 to week 18, he didn't score a touchdown. A lot of that had to do with Carson Wentz. He's not going to be a guy that's going to go out and get you like 10 catches, 140 yards. That's not really what he does. That's not how that offense really works. It's similar to the Tennessee offense. As a running back who's going to get most of the looks, Michael Pittman's going to have to score touchdowns. And I think with Matt Ryan, it makes it a lot easier. But remember, he still has 0 competition in the passing game. He is the number 1 target, the only guy that has any real experience offensively on the outside, and a veteran quarterback who has a history of throwing to receivers with his build. Big body guys that can go up and get it, that is not afraid to fit it into tight windows, which fits Michael Pittman's game. He is their number 1. He is their number 2. And then Nyheim Hines is probably their number 3. So I think Michael Pittman this year is primed to have I don't even know if I'd call it a breakout season because I thought last year was close to his breakout year. But I think this year you could be looking at a guy that goes for close to 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns.
So what about, and AJ, you know this very well because of Matt Ryan and his days with the Atlanta Falcons. There was that time, and I'm not going to make the comparison of Michael Pittman Jr. and Julio Jones, but there was a time where a lot of people were very upset because Julio Jones would get everything but touchdowns. So you talk about the problems of Michael Pittman Jr. last year of not being the guy who scored the touchdowns, but just being the guy of getting yards. It is oddly similar to what Julio Jones was with Matt Ryan and the Falcons.
No, not the same. First of all, Atlanta's offense had a problem because Atlanta would never go to Julio Jones in the red zone. That was the biggest gripe with them, is they'd always go elsewhere. They would never force feed Julio in the red zone. They'd force feed him 20-20 and then go somewhere else, and he wouldn't score any touchdowns. That might be one of the biggest fantasy misconceptions about a guy. It's like Julio Jones. Oh, he never scores any touchdowns. His first 2 years in the league, he had 8 and 10 touchdowns. He had 2 other years where he scored 8 touchdowns. Like, it was just they expected more because he had such big yardage numbers. He didn't score a lot of touchdowns because they didn't run plays for him in the red zone. I don't feel that way about Michael Pittman. And I'll be honest, Michael Pittman's probably a better red zone threat than Julio Jones. The way he's built, he's just that he goes and gets it. He's that big body guy that just goes and gets it. He's built for the red zone. And last year, again, Carson Wentz, it's all off the table when Carson Wentz is your quarterback.
So I think
I can't trust it.
I think this is really funny about how like Matt Ryan coming in and then what they have with Carson Wentz. Last year, the Indianapolis Colts threw a total of 521 pass attempts. Matt Ryan hasn't thrown less than 529 pass attempts since 2009. So the majority
second year
of
in the league?
His second year in the league. So Matt Ryan is he likes to throw the ball, and that's what he's been known to do in Atlanta. So like and that's why I brought up the thing with Jonathan Taylor, is because you don't just bring in Matt Ryan to have him throw the exact amount of times or less than what they did with Carson Wentz. You bring him in to change this offense because you have to compete in this NFL to throw. So that does alter what Jonathan Taylor does, and it also bumps up what Michael Pittman does. I do see a high-end wide receiver 2, fringe wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 type of season for Michael Pittman Jr. with Matt Ryan. Let's go to the Houston Texans.
Wait. I wanted to say one more thing about the comparison you made, which you brought up a really good point. Matt Ryan throws that way because Matt Ryan is checking at the line of scrimmage when there's too many guys in the box. Matt Ryan is being able to read defense and say, you know what? I know this play is designed for Jonathan Taylor, but I see a hole in the defense and I'm going to expose it. Carson Wentz, I don't know that he had the free reign to do that from a Frank Wright. Frank Wright was like, I know we got to keep you reined in. You turn around, you hand the ball off until I tell you to throw it. That's not going to be the case with Matt Ryan. This guy has so much experience. He is going to throw the ball because the matchups, when defenses are stacking the box, he's going to check out of the run and he's going to throw the ball to Michael Pittman or whoever.
AJ, you look irritated. What are you talking about? What's wrong?
Because
he's mad because I'm talking about his boy Carson Wentz.
No. Because the one time Matt Ryan should have checked, we would have won a damn Super Bowl, but he didn't.
But think about that. He should have checked to what? A run play. He didn't. He was still throwing the ball. Everybody was saying, "Why don't you run the ball?" Matt Ryan's mentality was no. They're playing a certain way. This is the right play. It's this and 2 Super Bowl conversations we can talk about this. The Matt Ryan, obviously against the Patriots when he decided to throw the ball and take the sack, and then the Seattle play, which they didn't give the ball to Marshawn Lynch, were both plays where Matt Ryan didn't check and Russell Wilson did check out of a run from a run play to a pass play. There's 2 formations they came out with. They ran the pass play because the defense dictated what they wanted you to do. Veteran quarterbacks do that because as a coach, you trust the process. It's not about pass or run. It's about what is the defense giving you? Make the appropriate play. Your job is to execute that play. Matt Ryan tried. Yes, in hindsight, it was bad. He took a sack. He shouldn't have. That's the bad play. Not necessarily the throw, but the fact that he took the sack was the bad play. So, but we only remember the stuff that cost you Super Bowls. The point
I
is,
was talking
Matt
about
Ryan's
earlier when they went to Julio on 3rd and 9 on the right side of the field, and you run the ball instead, and the clock runs down, and they may not have enough time to get to overtime. But that's a whole other conversation that I really don't want to revisit. So we can move on to the Houston Texans. That's right. I want to talk about the 4-13 Houston Texans more than I want to talk about my damn Atlanta Falcons.
Well, this one should be
pain. It should be. We talked about Brandin Cooks earlier as possibly the number 1 wide receiver in this AFC South, but this is a toss-up question. I didn't put anyone's name by it in the doc because really it's just a toss-up question. Is there and who is it that has the best fantasy value outside of Brandin Cooks? Is there anybody?
Keith Sweat. Nobody, baby. Real talk, I'll say it. Nope. If you want a name who the next best fantasy option is, I'm going to be honest, it's nobody, and you're taking a flyer on Dameon Pierce, and hopefully he turns out to be the guy. Everybody else is going to be an absolute headache because you're going to think he's on the field. Marlon Mack's on the field. He should score some fantasy points until he doesn't. Whoever the outside, Des Fitzpatrick, or I don't know who's their other. No, he's on the.
It might be John.
Who's their other?
Oh, Nico Collins.
Yeah. So I was gonna make the argument of the number one running back. That was late. Wait, whoa.
Nico Collins.
I was. I get it now. That's what I looked like. That was amazing. That was great. I think we can hear you now. I heard Nico Collins. That's about it. You did the and it was actually as interesting as you guys always told me it was watching me do it. So I got to live vicariously on the other. It was great. I was going to make the argument of the number one running back. We saw last year they were able to do it a couple weeks with Rex Burkhead, Mark Ingram when he was there. But the thing is we haven't seen Marlon Mack do anything since 2018-19. We don't know what Dameon Pierce is going to offer except that he was pretty decent in college. And then, you got to wait for Mechie to be healthy. And even still, we just don't know. So, you grab Brandin Cooks, you pick up Davis Mills off the waiver wire to stream him 1 week. That's it. Until you see anything else that tells you otherwise. That's the only thought.
Hey, Brevin Jordan did make an appearance on Aaron's top 12 tight ends last season. So that's actually a good point. I didn't think about mentioning him.
Yeah.
Brevin Jordan could be fantasy relevant when it comes to tight ends. He could fit into that tight end to maybe sneak into the top 15 or 18 or so. Definitely a streamer on some weeks.
I agree.
That's not a bad thought there.
Yeah. But Brandin Cooks, and then there's everybody else. I looked it up. Brandin Cooks is going at, and I'm going to just let you guys do the math here because, again, not doing the math. 55th pick. What round is that?
Round 4.
5th.
Pick 7.
Great. Round 5.
Okay, 48. I do that all the time.
So he's going in the 5th round. The next closest Texan is Dameon Pierce going at pick 134. So that's like the 11th round. Yeah. So not even close. Stay away from any other Texan other than Brandin Cooks and hope for the best. Let's go on to our last team here, and it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. The bulk of the topics or the bulk of the talk with this Jaguars team really, I think, goes to the running back position with James Robinson and Travis Etienne. AJ, how high are you drafting James Robinson? Obviously, his ADP right now has him going around in the 90th pick. That right there, I mean, maybe that's your spot. But how high are you drafting him? Or maybe are you just waiting for him to drop and then get that value from him?
And I think he will drop. I couldn't go any higher than round 8. And I wouldn't. To other people who really want James Robinson, I wouldn't go any higher than round 8. And that's like you're hoping to hold on to him. Like at that point, I hope you also have ETN because in my opinion, like he tore his ACL in week 16. He's still rehabbing, and they're giving you so much smoke and mirrors on when he's supposed to come back. Is it week 1? No. Is it week 4? We don't know. I've heard November. I've heard December. I've heard so many different things about when he comes back. Now, I will say this. Doug Peterson says when he's healthy and when he comes back, he sees him as a 3-down back and wants to use him for a heavy workload. So I think you're looking at a backfield that could be similar to, and not their talents, but the usage of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Like Travis Etienne will get the run. because I do think he's going to show out the first couple weeks, but I just don't know what to trust. Like if he comes back and Travis Etienne's been going great, are we only seeing James Robinson for the first 3 or 4 weeks at the goal line vulturing touchdowns? You like that, but you don't know if it's going to help you as often as you want it to be until he's really working. So at the highest, I would say the 8th, but me personally, I'd pick him up if he drops to me in the 10th. That's me, I'd stay away. I've had my fun with him, so you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like someone else can grab.
I like the potential of James Robinson. We discussed the ADP value between him and what you are very high on Chase Edmonds. You think he's going to could be a running back 1 this season, which is just mind blowing. But I like where James Robinson is going in drafts. So I think I would take him at his ADP right now. He's actually going as the RB 37 at pick 103. So you are looking at him around that 8th, 9th round. I think that is the sweet spot for me. I think I would take him at that value because we've seen what James Robinson can do. Obviously, coming off of a very severe injury, I think that definitely brings up some concern. And obviously, Travis Etienne now being there, taking away some carries, taking away some targets, matters a lot. I do just think, though, talent will prevail when it comes to James Robinson, and he'll still be a very good running back when he is on the field and return that value, if not surpass that value as the RB 37.
You say prevail, but I mean, like he's not going up against a scrub, and I know we haven't seen Travis Etienne in the NFL, but I mean, like we were ready for him to come out a year sooner because of how explosive he was, and then he went back and just did it again. And I know this only matters so much, but he's with this guy. He's with T-Law, ready to go again. That chemistry, like that's the chemistry that I can think about. It's still fresh. It's not like, and I still think they're going to be good, but it's not like Derek Carr and Devontae Adams. That's years removed. We're talking about 2 seasons. We're talking about the same year. And Trevor Lawrence now has 1 year in the NFL and can tell him how he needs to operate coming into the league to work with him the right way. So you say talent prevails, but we're talking about 2 very talented guys.
I always, and you guys can laugh at me all you want about this. I always felt bad for James Robinson in this situation once they drafted Travis Etienne, just because the fact that like Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, they're boys, and now James Robinson just gets pushed off to the side, watching his quarterback now fall in love with his running back. He's his boy, and now he's just the ugly duckling in that running back group. But he's not, because I think James Robinson is a very good running back. Go ahead, Aaron.
Well, first off, people are really high on Travis Etienne, and I think he's going to play a role, but I think people forget how much usage he had at Clemson. Injuries are a factor with this guy. You're talking about a guy that had almost 700 carries in college. He's got to prove that he can stay healthy. I don't see him as being an every down back in the NFL. So I do believe that James Robinson has a role when he comes back. And James Robinson has proven to be a really, really good running back. 3 down. I think you're going to run into a situation where, to what AJ's point, I do think this is more of a Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt type situation, with Etienne being used a little bit more in the passing game, even with James Robinson on the field. I think that's ultimately what will happen. And I like it. I like the idea of that. It still remains to be seen what kind of fantasy output James Robinson's going to have, though, coming off of the injury. That's the biggest deal here. Are you going to be able to wait for him? Or are you going to have to reach on him? I believe a lot of people are going to shy away from James Robinson early. So I do believe there's chances where he's dropping into the 10th and 11th round, just because people are going to realize he's not ready for training camp, and they're going to kind of shy away thinking, oh, this is Etienne's backfield, and once he gets the job, he's going to run away with it. I don't believe that to be the case. So if you can get James Robinson as a steal, 11th, 12th round, and everybody's passing on him, you take him, you sit him down for the first half of the season, and come the second half of the season, you could have a nice RB2.
So do you think that Travis Etienne can be do you think Travis Etienne as an RB2 is too rich, or do you think that's a sweet spot for him?
No, he's a flex. he's a flex to me at best. I don't believe he's going to be an RB2.
Right now, he is as the RB 23 and going with the 48th pick. So like this is, I mean,
behind guys, there are guys that are behind him. For instance, AJ Dillon, I'd probably have ahead of him. Miles Sanders, I'd probably have ahead of him. Damian Harris, I might have ahead of him. He's not going to get enough volume in that offense to start because number one, he's not a volume back he's not going to be a volume back like that in that offense. They're going to have to throw. Most of his work is going to come from the passing game. They don't score for a lot of touchdowns, so his touchdown numbers are not going to be very high. I see a lot of Travis Etienne games as 11 carries, 52 yards, 5 catches, 36 yards, like stuff like that.
So let me throw this perspective out there though. Like I get what you're saying. Like they don't score a lot of touchdowns, you're gonna have to throw, so on and so forth. We know Doug Peterson wants to throw, but when you say their offense won't and will do this, I mean, we don't know this offense anymore. Like what they had last year was atrocious, first off. And now Doug Peterson comes in and implements something completely different. They have weapons, so to speak.
Well,
at least more weapons than last year.
We know it's a second-year quarterback who didn't look very good last year with a bunch of new weapons that they have to acclimate. So I'm sorry, but
developed.
My point, like you expect a lot from this offense being an undeveloped in the first year of a new system.
I expect more. I don't think he's gonna throw 16 interceptions. I don't think that's gonna happen. I think he does find the end zone a couple more times. I think Travis Etienne can bail them out a couple more times. I don't think they're going to be world beaters. I heard some dumb shit earlier that someone's like they can be this year's Bengals. I don't see that, but I don't think we're looking at a team that's just as putrid as they were last season.
I would love for the Jaguars to be this year's Bengals.
Yeah, I just want to watch it smile a little bit.
Yeah, but so what do you guys think? Do you think this matters at all? What you brought up Doug Peterson coming in, implementing a new system, new offensive coordinator, Press Taylor comes in as well. He used to be the senior offensive assistant for the Colts, quarterbacks coach for the Eagles under the Doug Peterson era. Does that matter at all to you guys when looking at like the progression of a Trevor Lawrence and maybe the fantasy progression of Trevor Lawrence? The finger. He's giving us the finger.
No, I was just waiting to see if my internet was going to come back up. First of all, Doug Peterson's going to call the plays. So Doug Peterson's really the one developing Trevor Lawrence. It's not Press Taylor or whoever the hell you want to talk about.
Hey, man, don't disrespect Press Taylor.
But I didn't – my internet went out, and I didn't really get a chance to respond to AJ's point about that, the new offense and all that stuff. I'm not saying they're not going to be better. They can't be worse. Their offense was atrocious last year. I mean, it was absolute dog shit. But James Robinson only had 700 yards last year.
Yeah, they did not use him the way they used him the year before. And that was something that got to me, actually, was the fact that James Robinson was used so heavily in 2020. And then 2021, there was weeks where they'd have him with 20 carries, and then another week they'd have him with 5. Like it just what, and like I don't know how that comes back. Like to have a year like that following the big year you had, and then be injured. So that's kind of one of the things that I'm like that worries me a little bit. And again, when I say worry, I don't know when he's coming back. That's the biggest issue for me at that point in time. Vinny,
I think he's gone.
I jumped in full. I responded in kind. Nowhere near probably what he was gonna say, but
I'm just hopeful as a Jags fan, man. I'm just hopeful. Okay, there he is. He's alive. Go ahead, Aaron.
I'm so sorry.
I'm not alive. Not really. Jaguars suck.
Could you draft? Did it sound like I was just talking over you while you were talking on your screen?
No.
Or could you see that you were okay? Because I was wondering about that. I was like, he probably
enough of this small talk, Aaron. Your connection's great right now. Finish off.
Let's talk about Christian Kirk. I love the value of a Christian Kirk this year, just because I do see the improvement in Trevor Lawrence. But make no mistake about it, the Jaguars are going to have to throw a lot, which is why I don't think Travis Etienne will reach much better than running back 2, because they're going to be behind in games. They're not good enough to take leads and keep leads. Like, they're going to throw a lot. Christian Kirk, Marvin Jones are going to be the focal point of that. I've all but given up on Laviska Shenault and stuff. So, but I do think Christian Kirk is going to play a role in this offense. I do believe there's going to be some bubble screens, some quick stuff around the line of scrimmage, and he is electric with the ball in his hands. He can get downfield. The biggest thing here was protecting Trevor Lawrence, and I think they addressed the offensive line that will allow these guys to get down the field, and they'll be able to make big plays. So Christian Kirk, I like where his value is going right now, kind of as an underrated guy.
Let me see it. This may be wrong, and I'm just throwing it out there. What similarities do you see between like an Alshon Jeffrey and a Marvin Jones Jr.? Very similar players or not similar players? Am I ridiculous to say that?
I mean, I would look at them both as possession receivers, but I think Alshon Jeffrey had a little bit more explosiveness when it came to like contested catches. I mean, Marvin Jones is somebody who can do it, but any wide receiver worth his gloves should be able to make some contested catches. Whereas Alshon Jeffrey, if you threw it up, he was going to get it. You know, that was the era of the Georgia big boys. You know what I mean? And I don't know if Marvin Jones has that in him, but he's consistent and he's trustworthy. When you throw Marvin Jones the ball and he's going over the middle, he's probably coming down with it, in my opinion. So
the reason why I asked that is because I said this last year about Marvin Jones, and I was very wrong. I don't want to say very wrong, but like I was high on Marvin Jones last year with Trevor Lawrence coming in, and I thought that Trevor Lawrence and Marvin Jones had a connection that would put Marvin Jones as the wide receiver 1 on that team. And I think there is something to say about Marvin Jones having a second year with Trevor Lawrence. And I know Christian Kirk's value, and I know that he's a good player, and I'm not saying he's not going to be the number 1 receiver on that team, but don't be surprised if Marvin Jones ends up being a fantasy relevant flex option this season.
Stop. You sound like every other person that has mentioned Marvin Jones' name for the past 10 seasons. It's the same thing with Marvin Jones every year. He either starts really good or have like 3 games where he has 2 touchdowns, and they're like, oh, this is the year. He's the same every year. At the end of the season, you look at his numbers, he's not getting 1,000 yards. He's going to be right around 6 to 9 touchdowns. He'll have a decent year. He'll be a wide receiver 4, and we'll call it a day. Like, no. There's no second year with Trevor Lawrence. There's no second year with any quarterback. The guy couldn't do it with Matt Stafford. I mean, it just, no.
Okay. All right.
He'll be solid. Like, as a football player, Marvin Jones is a very, very good player to have on your football team. He's good in the red zone, contested catches, great IQ. But from a fantasy asset, he's one of the most frustrating fantasy players I've ever seen. Because he will get picked up. If he's not drafted, he gets picked up after he goes for 2 touchdowns. Then he'll have 4 weeks, nothing. And you just had so much hope for him because the talent is there, but just never quite works out.
I am on board. I can agree with that. I have had Marvin Jones in the past and have went through that hardship of dealing with whether or not he's going to pop off or not, and then dropping him. Then he pops off, pick him back up, and then he gives me some gooses, and I move on and be heartbroken. But good talks about the AFC South. Lots of interesting debates about these wide receivers. I like what the Colts are doing with Matt Ryan. I like what the Titans. Go ahead.
I have a question. Is the AFC South the least relevant fantasy division? When you think about it, when you can name Derrick Henry, I mean, really think about the players. Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, Brandin Cooks, maybe if you throw in James Robinson and Travis Etienne. 6 players, really. If no other player got drafted, you would say, okay.
Yeah, I think that they definitely could be number 1. I don't want to. This is just me thinking off the top of the top of the dome, but like the AFC East, you might be able to throw the AFC East in there, maybe behind them. Though I'm not. I mean, you have much better options in the AFC East, but like the depth of that. I mean, you have Allen, Diggs,
the Buffalo Bills alone.
Right, that's fair.
And then the Dolphins, and then you got the Dolphins.
It was really just just off the top of the noggin because you think of the Patriots have no one, the Jets have. The Patriots and Jets have some sneaky players, like similar to like what a James Robinson, Travis Etienne. They're sneaky players, but like I do agree with you. I think that the AFC South is probably the weakest fantasy division out there. I think it's fair to say. Crazy. That does it though for this weak ass AFC South fantasy outlook. We'll be back again tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Right here on YouTube to talk about hopefully not a bitch ass AFC South fantasy outlook. Until then, though, for your boy AJ Johnson and for Aaron Dukes, I am me. We will see you tomorrow.
Peace out. If you can hear
Holla.
We know we were a much better team than we came up representing